back when I used to dabble in the world of sports betting, I think I saw that like the top 1% of sports bettors win about like 56% of the time, something about that. Or something around that number. There's probably some standard deviation there. Where would you say that your guys' win rate is currently? I don't know how long
So
it's been, but
it's only been, about a month, but we're hitting 63% of our picks so far. Um,
Welcome to Your One podcast, where future leaders take on the complexities of today.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Year One Podcast, where we explore business and political topics with a Gen Z perspective. And as always, helping me to do just that is the insightful trio of Micah McNeil, Felipe Segura, and Zachary Crilly. And today is a very special day because joining us is a guest with a very interesting background, a background where the intersection of data analytics, entrepreneurship, and sports betting meet. Joining us from the bustling streets of Washington, D.C. is none other than a former Federal Reserve financial analyst turned sports betting innovator, Oliver Risch. Welcome to the pod, Oliver. How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Well, happy to have you. And I know you left a promising career in federal finance, and then you ventured into the high stakes world of sports betting, founding Sports Genie, which is changing the way, to my perspective at least, which is changing the way people bet with a unique data driven algorithm. But first, let's start off with a more high level conversation about the landscape of sports betting that we find ourselves in and how you pick that industry. But we actually had an episode 26, where we unpacked the absolute tear that the sports betting industry is on right now. Ever since the 2018 Supreme Court ruling, there's now 30 states that have legalized sports betting online. And in 2023 alone, 120 billion was wagered and 10.3 billion was recorded as losses. You probably consider them profits. I know on the two sides of the industry. But let's zoom out a bit first and get your perspective on the rapid growth and legalization of the sports betting market and where you think it's going. Like if there's room for smaller players or if the market has been taken up by the BetMGMs, DraftKings, FanDuels of the world. So just some higher level thoughts.
I mean, you summed it up pretty well. Big picture, it's just been exploding ever since that Supreme Court decision. And yeah, as you said, I mean, the numbers just this past year alone are pretty astounding. Big picture, I guess where I stand on how it's developed, I think in general it's a good thing. I don't, as long as people are betting responsibly, I don't see any issue with allowing adults to make their own financial decisions. And as a sports bettor and sports fan myself, I enjoy it. Um, as far as where kind of the industry dynamics are headed, um, it's hard to say. I think in general, as far as the booking side of it, it definitely is very concentrated. And we're starting to see, it's just been a bloodbath in marketing with all the biggest books. You turn on any NBA playoff game or even just like MLB game, you'll just be flooded with marketing ads from all these top books. So as far as like bookmaking itself, I think we'll probably continue to, see maybe a little more consolidation, but it's going to be, a few big players. I think it will eventually. It's kind of similar, like with marijuana, for example. It was like more and more money in all these states where it was legalized. More and more money was put in into all these growing operations, and then finally, at a certain point, the price just hit rock bottom in all these states. So I think we're going to eventually kind of see a similar dynamic in sports betting, where at a certain point, these books aren't going to be able, because they're not making money right now with all the money they're spending on marketing. So we will kind of reach a steady state sooner rather than later. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my big picture overview. Yeah.
That's interesting. You compare it to the marijuana market because I never thought of that, and I feel like they are very similar. Do you think like in that industry, the impact on kind of younger generations and younger people is definitely there in both, But I guess in the marijuana use case, it was happening on the black market. People were getting it no matter what. And the same thing for sports betting, where people were, I knew a good friend that had a pretty big book that was just behind the scenes. So it's kind of already going on. But what do you think about the implications of making it legal, of making it extremely accessible? I mean, I can go on an app, put $5 in an app, and then get $100 of free play. And that is just so simple to me. Like, what do you think the implications of that are?
Yeah, it is. It is interesting, and there are some of these, like you were talking about, like the $100, no sweat, same game parlay, whatever. Like they're really trying to kind of rope people in and get you. It's like, oh, it felt really good to bet $20 and win 40 last night. Why don't I do it again? So I think in general, I mean, I think I have no problem with legalization. We definitely do need to be monitoring. I mean, in general, people abusing it, and in particular, younger people abusing it. I think that I don't know what the safeguards need to be exactly, but we need to have some sorts of safeguards. I guess one other example I'll give, we kind of saw something a little bit similar with stock trading and with apps like Robinhood. All of a sudden, it became incredibly easy for retail investors to buy and sell stocks, as well as make more advanced, like options trading, for example. And all of a sudden, I mean, for a lot of people, it's great, right? Like, I can just buy and sell stocks on my phone. It's super easy. A lot of people lost a lot of money because they didn't fully understand the implications of what they were doing. So, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, we need to make sure that we have a public that's educated about the risks of sports betting, because it is innately risky. And we need to also make sure that sports books aren't, engaging in predatory behavior where they're like marketing towards kids or trying to influence, aiming, like, what we saw with, like with vape companies where they have all these crazy fruity flavors. It's like pretty overt attempts to sell to children, right? Like, we shouldn't be seeing that in sports betting. So I think, I'm happy with legalization, but there's just some common sense safeguards we need to have to prevent those kinds of bad outcomes.
For sure. And I mean, I definitely, moving into the conversation around what you're working on, I know it's not exactly a book, so it's actually somewhat like going against the books and beating the books. And I know I have a bunch of friends. I used to bet. I know last podcast I said I could have started a company with people fading my picks. So maybe Sports Genie can be that combatant that we all use to get a better chance, to get a leg up. But I would like to just dive into how you started it. And was it like one day you're crunching numbers at the Federal Reserve and you're looking at prediction on inflation rate and how consumers will react to a certain interest rate, and you realize that could be done to the sports betting lines? Like, how did you come up with the idea?
So it's sadly a much less interesting origin story than that. I was really just chatting with a friend of mine from college, and he knew that I, had some experience doing data science work, and we were just chatting about the NBA. And he's like, you should build a model, spit out some projections, see if we can't make some money off it. And at that time, I had, I'd done a little bit of data science work, but I really didn't know very much about, in terms of like actually writing up code that could, load and manipulate and analyze data, as well as, make projections from it. So it really started with just a very simple idea. I was like, all right, I'm going to build a model that just predicts who's going to win NBA games. We're going to see if we can make money off it. And it's really just sort of slowly grown in scope and scale since then. It sort of, I built some basic models, and then I was like, okay, we need to do some profitability testing. So I figured out a site where I could scrape, up-to-date NBA betting odds from all the biggest books. And then we started doing some testing. We're like, okay, we're losing a lot of money on our picks right now. So then we're back to the drawing board on the modeling. So in terms of, I guess, both our projections and how we're creating them, what data we're using, as well as how we're putting ourselves out there. So it started with just a very basic newsletter that, I would send to, a few friends and whatnot. And then a very basic iteration of a website. And now we have like a fully fledged web application. It's out there. And it's all this stuff. For context also, I really didn't know how to do any of this stuff when I started. So I have the excuse of, I was working full time most of the time while I was working on this, but also I didn't know what I was doing. So I've kind of been teaching myself these skills as I've been working on it. But yeah, it's kind of slowly developed from this very basic conversation into, a legitimate, if not yet profitable business.
So Jerome Powell didn't come to your desk one day and say that you need to build a great algorithm for him to get NBA picks?
Yeah, no, he actually, he has worked up a little bit of some debt himself. So needed some help. No, yeah. In terms of there's not really a ton of direct applications from my work, but my work at the Federal Reserve. I did learn a lot of very valuable skills there in terms of just working with data, because that was really a lot of my day to day. So it has, served me very well in a lot of indirect ways.
Oliver, a couple of questions. Obviously, this is probably a B2C business. How does pricing end up working? And then what is sort of proprietary about the technology, or the software, the algorithm that you're building out as compared to, someone else on Instagram sending out their picks and people paying for them?
So as far as the first question, pricing, right now we're not charging anything. It's just totally free. So, like you said, on social media, we have, we post our picks for the day across all our social media channels. We have them on the website now too. But at this point, we're just trying to drive traffic to the website. We're just trying to build a user base, see how much momentum we can get going into next season. Because right now also, we're just NBA. We're hoping, potentially to expand to other leagues and maybe other sports. But for now, it's just NBA. We just want to get traffic on the website. Eventually, we're thinking some sort of freemium model where people who don't want to pay, they get, access to most of our resources on the website. And, some basic ads, nothing too obnoxious. And then for people who want all the content, a basic subscription, nothing too expensive. And then as far as the second part of the question, I guess what sort of distinguishes us from, anyone, there's a million people out there just like tweeting, oh, bet this tonight, right? I think the biggest thing is we have the numbers to back it up. So we've, it's been a lot of work leading to the point where we felt comfortable tweeting picks. It's like, in a way, it's almost my worst fear is to like tweet and like put out to the world just like bad financial advice. Primarily because at the very beginning, like our only users were my like friends and family. So I'm like actively losing all these people I care about's money if I'm putting out, bad advice. So all of which is to say, I guess, we weren't comfortable putting stuff out there until we had the track record to back it up. And now we have that. And, we've only been putting out picks since the beginning of the playoffs, but they've been paying off so far. So we're seeing that payoff and actually, I guess, post-launch.
Yeah, I guess in a continuation of that question, thank you for that answer. I guess what is that percentage? Is it, back when I used to dabble in the world of sports betting, I think I saw that like the top 1% of sports bettors win about like 56% of the time, something about that. Something around that number. There's probably some standard deviation there. Where would you say that your guys' win rate is currently? I don't know how long it's been, but
it's only been, about a month, but we're hitting 63% of our picks so far.
Nice.
And for context, these are all player props. So like typically the percentages you'll see are for just like kind of, you assume it's the standard payout, which is, minus 110 on American bucks, like 1.91 on European, where for every dollar you bet, you get 91 cents in profit if it hits. Player props is a little more variability, but it's generally, our picks have averaged out to around there. So if anything, we've like been a little lucky. Like I have a hard time seeing us maintaining 63% hit rate. That's pretty insane. But so far the numbers have been really good, which we're happy about.
There we go.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Just to drive home 2 points, 63% win rate and 100% free. I mean, I think that your users are going to be flooding in with those two factors combined.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, I actually had a question. Maybe this is a little bit more on the technical side, but there's the proverbial 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration quote about entrepreneurship and whatnot. This seems like you had to do a lot of planning and like you said, how comfortable you are kind of sending out these picks in the beginning when it's just your family and friends that feel it, right? That initial, whether you're right or wrong. How much would you say you went into the planning phase as opposed to just doing it and then just seeing what happens and then reiterating? Because it seems like you have now kind of some type of plan in your head for the next 5 steps or whatever, but those things change or tend to pivot a lot. So really curious how that's been for you so far.
So I think for the first, I mean, I guess I've been working on this off and on for 2.5 years now. For the first year, it was not really, it was me kind of playing around with data on my computer. It wasn't much. At a certain point, I was like, wow, I actually, maybe could do something with this. And so, yeah, I think at that point, I think it's been a lot of planning. I think a big part of it too is, I mean, as I said, a lot of the things that were required to build what we have right now, I didn't have the technical skills to create when we started. So a lot of it is like, okay, like, our old version of the site, was slow and clunky, didn't work very well. So I'm like, okay, we have to build like a new front end and a new back end, and they have to interact with each other. And then I'm trying to like map out the plan for that. But then I'm like, I don't know how to write front end code. So it's hard to give like a time estimate on like how long that aspect of this master plan is going to take. So I think there's been a lot of planning involved, but also a lot of it's been kind of an iterative process, where we need to kind of, just because we don't have, like, I'm teaching myself how to build these things as I'm building them. So a lot of work has gone into it and a lot of planning, but also a lot of it's been kind of just, it'll get done when it gets done. And at that point, we'll kind of go back to the drawing board, see how that affects everything else. So it hasn't been, like 6, 12, 18 month like plans out to the day or anything like that. It's definitely been, a little ramshackle at times.
No, that's great. I mean, that's super important for, I think, people to hear in general, because you get caught sometimes in this planning phase of, okay, we're going to do this, then this, then this, and it has to be perfectly lined up. And it's just kind of like you try something, it doesn't work. Oh no, it's the front end, like something completely unrelated to the core product. Fires come up and you have to put them out. So that's great.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I don't think I've ever hit a single deadline for this, in all honesty. Like the one deadline we did hit was launching at the start of the playoffs this year. So I guess that's maybe our biggest accomplishment, is hitting our first deadline. But yeah, you're right. No matter how quick you think you can do something, problems will always crop.
Yeah, and Oliver, you've alluded to the different phases of the business, and I'm wondering if, from a competitive landscape perspective, if there's another company that's doing something similar that's like further down the line, if there's a spectrum of Instagram users giving picks to a site like yours that has users and has the ability to profit from their user base and charge a certain amount, whatever that is. Have you seen companies pop up like that?
So there is a lot of competition. I think it's kind of, I put it into two general categories. There's kind of the legacy players, like these, like OddsShark or Vegas Insider, where they've been around for a long time, and they kind of post basic. It's more a web presence for them. They have a lot of traffic on their website. They have a lot of ads up there, and if you pay extra, it's a freemium service like what we're targeting. And then you have the new, kind of the new wave, where it's just a lot of times it's not even like official corporations. It's just people who created their own model and spit out their picks, and they just charge people for access. They'll use platforms like Discord, where they just, you have to pay money to get into the chat or whatever the term is. And then, you get all their picks. So we're hoping to kind of strike a balance between those two, where we have the freemium presence on the web, And the product we're offering really is kind of the combination of the picks that we recommend, but also the site itself, where we have a lot of just really helpful analytics. We post, all the latest bets at all the latest sports books. So you can go to our website and you're like, okay, I'm, hoping to bet on someone in the Celtics game tonight. You can go and you're like, okay, let's look at, over unders on points. And it's like, we have at all the sports books, what's the latest price for Tatum's over on points. So yeah, we're hoping to kind of strike that balance. I think we haven't mapped out exactly what kind of our pricing is going to be. We're maybe something like a basic tier and then a pro tier where you pay a little bit, you get site access and a limited number of picks. You pay the full amount and you get all our picks every day. And, we'll meet you where you are. So if people are on Discord, we'll have our own Discord chat. If, you want them texted to you, we'll just text them to you when the line's open. So we're hoping to kind of, like I said, bridge that gap where we have the online presence, and we have, the data, almost like a data dashboard for people who are just, they want to view all the numbers, but they want to make their own picks. But then we also have, our own picks ready to deliver to people however is most convenient for them to receive it. Yeah, that's kind of what we're hoping as far as our place in the competitive landscape where we're hoping to land.
Yeah, listening to that, Oliver gives a lot of context, because I think the market on giving picks and selling picks is very saturated, as you alluded to. A common Joe gets on Instagram and gives their picks, and the UFC match on Saturday, and they'll show their win rate or whatever. But I think the latter point, talking about the dashboard and sort of giving consumers that real-time analytics into what a player has maybe done in the last 5 games, is very much where the alpha is. And sort of creating the user experience for that. So the fact that you're dabbling into both niches is something that I find very creative, and I think there's a huge potential upside from that. So it's nice hearing that from you.
Yeah, no, it's funny. One thing we kind of noticed early on looking at just our analytics numbers for social media versus the site is it seemed like a lot of people didn't fully understand how to use the site. And I think, to me, I built the site, so it makes a lot of sense. But I think it's a little overwhelming. There's a lot of data there and a lot of numbers kind of being flashed at you. So we're hoping to kind of try and bridge that gap as well and make it more accessible and understandable. So like on social media, now I'm like, when I announce our picks on TikTok, I green screen myself over me browsing the site. So it's like, this is how we landed on these picks. You can do the same thing on our site.
That's awesome. And it feels like you're coming up to this intersection of, okay, when does it make sense to monetize my user base? I feel like that's an age-old question of like, what kind of metric do I feel comfortable with promoting, sharing, and being able to ask for money? Do you have a user base size in mind, or some metric that you're keeping tabs on? It's like, okay, if we can maintain this 60% win rate, I mean, even 51%, you're in the green. But if we can maintain a 60% win rate, then I can monetize X number of users. How do you think about that?
It's a good question. I think, honestly, I think if we're able to maintain our success, as far as just the accuracy of the picks we're recommending and just the ROI, then I think we're going to feel pretty comfortable just converting from, a fully free to just a freemium website by the start of next season. So that's our tentative plan. I mean, one nice thing that we found is we've ran the numbers because we've been collecting betting data on player props for a while now. So we have all of this past season, and we were seeing pretty high profitability for certain categories of bets. And that's kind of the key thing for us is our models aren't, crazy insightful. I think we're doing some good things with them. We're feeding them decent data, and we're using sound statistical techniques. But we're not, reinventing the wheel. What we've really done is kind of narrowed in on the specific categories of bets that we found are most profitable. And so that's really what gives me kind of confidence moving, if we have 500 users or 50,000, either way, being comfortable, being like, okay, this is a service that is worth paying for, and we're going to charge a reasonable rate for it. is because we have, the track record, just these playoffs, but also just looking historically at the data. The accuracy has been there. The return on investment has been there. So we're confident.
Awesome. And I do want to trace our steps a bit and look back at that switch from the corporate world to now the entrepreneurial world, the wonderful world of entrepreneurship. But how has it been, that switch? Like, what were your feelings around that switch? And have you made the right decision? Like, just look back on your decision. Now you're a couple months down the road, but what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's definitely been a big change. I think overall it's been the right decision for me. I think, I learned a lot when I worked at the Fed. I met a lot of amazing people, but I think the time had come for me to move on to something new. And I think I'd been working on this so much in my free time, I felt like I almost owed it to myself to give it a shot. Maybe it turns into a real thing. Maybe it doesn't work out. But I've invested so much time. I was like, I might as well take this chance. So as far as, kind of, do I regret it or am I enjoying the decision? I'm really enjoying it. As far as like what it's been like day to day, it's maybe like a little, I don't know. I feel like I have too much freedom sometimes. Like there's no one there like checking that I'm online at 9 a.m. Like I don't have to worry about the green team circle ever. So there definitely, are some days where I'm, not feeling totally motivated, but you got to self-motivate when there's no one there looking over your shoulder. So it's been a transition, but overall I'm really enjoying it. And I definitely enjoy the flexibility that it offers too, where I don't need to worry about being online for certain work hours. It's more like I just need to get these things done by the end of the week and I can do them when I want, and kind of map out my schedule as it best suits me.
I'd like to hone in on that a little bit more because there's members of our audience that are either running their own venture currently or have the strong intention to start their own venture in the near future. I'm curious about your self motivation and in this limited amount of time that you've transitioned from working for a large organization to working for yourself in a small organization. It's if I'm not mistaken, it's you and your brother, which is great to have him involved too. But I'm curious if you found tools in these few months on those days when you wake up and you want to hit snooze or the sun's shining, you want to go out and play golf, or you're coming up against a tough obstacle and you just don't want to do it. How do you self-motivate and push through?
I mean, I guess first off, I'm definitely not perfect. There definitely are some days where I like set out to get a lot done and I don't accomplish it all. And that's how it goes sometimes. So I think that's number one, is having that kind of self-awareness that you're not always going to be able to do everything, and that's okay. I think my biggest thing is I've been looking at it in terms of like, I guess, project-based and not time-based. So I'm like, these are kind of the big things that just need to happen. And I found that I have kind of gradually shifted towards a schedule that best suits me, by not worrying about the time and focusing more on just getting the things done that I need to get done in a reasonable time frame. So yeah, I think, I don't know. I early on, I was very worried about, would I got to get my 40 hours in. I got to like make sure I'm checking all my boxes. So I'd like be up, super early trying to do everything. And, some days that worked really well, some days it didn't. So I think for me, just focusing more on the results and not the process has actually led to a pretty effective process, I'd say.
Well, we are coming up on 30 minutes here, but we keep it short, sweet, and impactful on Year One Podcast. And Oliver, I mean, that was a great conversation. Super, super interesting. And we wish you all the best and hope that some users can find this valuable and win some money using your algorithm. And I'm sure they will. And we'll definitely keep an eye on it. But yeah, if I ever do a bet, I'm definitely using Sports Genie because my past history has not been where it needs to be. But we really appreciate your time, Oliver, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Cheers.
Thank you, Oliver.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
course. All right. See you next time.